Hey everyone, David here. Welcome to a Testing Tuesday. We are going to be going through some leadership stuff today with leading through uncertainty. I'm going to be using a board here and I'm just going to draw through some stuff for you all and we will kind of jump right in. As you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A. Clarissa will help us choose questions for the session. So again, I'm David. I'm basically a coach and entrepreneur. I help people test their business ideas. A lot of what you're going to get today is loosely based off of my book, Testing Business Ideas. We have some things in leadership at the back of that book, and I just kind of wanted to expand upon it a little bit and give you kind of my latest thinking on it and how I coach folks. So we'll still be using this as a reference guide, but today I'm going to try to keep it informal and just kind of give you behind the scenes like I'm coaching folks. Um, the idea of today, this goal is pretty much always the goal when I'm working through helping companies, which is this idea of like how do you de-risk your business and product ideas. So today we're going to be focusing a lot more on uncertainty and how we lead through uncertainty and how we help coach teams and leaders through uncertainty. But overall, the goal is still we want to be able to de-risk what we're working on, build a culture of experimentation, and essentially help enable people and help empower people. I do have a code of conduct, which I will just throw out there, which is always like Bill and Ted code of conduct, which is be excellent to one another. So when we're asking questions and in chat, just be mindful and be respectful in tone. And yeah, let's just jump right in. So with uncertainty, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to like live sticky this out for you all because I do a lot of my coaching with kind of visual whiteboards too. And so a lot of my coaching sessions aren't necessarily me just talking to people. I don't feel like the best way to coach people. I really love having some kind of board that I use as a visual representation. And so whether it's people pulling up their strategy with me, if it's a board level or C-suite, or if it's someone on a team level and I'm working with leaders at the team level, I think one thing to keep in mind when I talk about like how you lead through uncertainty, it's from different levels of the organization. So it's not necessarily confined to, just the top of the org. Obviously, there are different levels. And so I just wanted to kind of preface that. But when you think about uncertainty, I really try to kind of break it apart a bit. And that tends to help with my coaching. It tends to help me look at behaviors and help kind of separate things a bit. So when I think of uncertainty, I think of instances with high uncertainty, right? And that's usually where I'm playing. Whereas there's also instances of low uncertainty where something's like really repeatable. It's something you all have done a million times before. You can almost like break that thing down into tasks and just have people execute on that. But a lot of what I'm working on, especially in my coaching and consulting, is working with high uncertainty. Working with um, we're trying to reimagine our business in a different way, or we're trying to go into adjacent markets, or it's a startup founder that's just has an idea and they're really trying to figure out is there a problem behind that. And so I'm mostly pulled over here into the high uncertainty space. But I do want to just acknowledge the low uncertainty. It's not necessarily one style fits all, especially when you're trying to lead through knowledge work. So one of the ways I start kind of teasing this apart in my coaching, whether I'm working with leaders at the team level or portfolio level or the executive or board level, is what kind of environment are we dealing with in the context of the conversation, right? So quite often, I'm helping teams try to and leaders try to create new streams of revenue maybe that they've never seen before in a different market where they're taking their value prop and they're kind of reimagining in a different way. And so in that, what I'm often trying to help them do is to model things. Okay. This is where, we often use something like the business model canvas to do this, right? Or different canvases where we're trying to model things out. We're not necessarily trying um, to plan. So when low uncertainty, when I'm dealing with folks and we have something that is repeatable and it's something that is a known and we're kind of experts in the space and we're just kind of executing away, then I think planning is really appropriate there. But even think about from a business point of view, when you have really high uncertainty, maybe planning is useful, but the plan itself usually isn't. And so I really come back to modeling, right? So we think about, can we create a business model, for example, before we jump into a business plan? And so when I'm coaching through this whole, like, how do we lead through uncertainty? I think the tendency of sometimes of how we become leaders is, oh, we have to just plan our way through it. And I'm the expert and I'm just going to create a plan and we're going to execute on the plan. Quite often I'm trying to pull them back and say, look, there's a lot of uncertainty about the market here, about will people pay enough? Will we keep costs low enough? There's a lot of uncertainty around our ability to execute on this. So let's talk about just models that we can kind of model out and test. And those can inform our plan later on. But right now, when it's high uncertainty, we want to really work through our models. So when I'm coaching people through, I'm trying to pull them closer to how do we model versus like, let's just jump in and plan. The other thing I focus on with my coaching is how to think about this. It really comes to decision making, right? So we want to keep um, our decisions small. Okay. So when I'm coaching people through high uncertainty situations, I'm trying to say, well, maybe we don't even understand the problem, or the problem changes as we learn more about it. So let's keep our decisions small. There's another way I've seen this framed in the past of like, how do you kind of flatten the cost of change curve, which is, I believe I learned that from Kent Beck way back in the day, which is, if you go all in on this decision when uncertainty is really high, it becomes very expensive to change it later, most of the time. So we try to keep our decisions small. So with our tests, right, we try to keep our tests small. You've probably seen me, draw this thing a million times, which is kind of this graph, right, where we talk about fidelity and uncertainty, and it's like, oh, you're starting here when the uncertainty is really high. Let's keep our decisions and our testing small, right? Let's keep our fidelity small. Let's keep our costs down if possible, and try to keep our decision making small. So that's another thing with, how do we lead through uncertainty is, how do we kind of keep our decisions small and then give ourselves permission as we learn more, where we finally get to something where it's, something at scale, right? So if you think about when uncertainty and you have something that is scalable and you've already kind of de-risked a bunch of things, then you can worry about like your decisions at scale. But quite often we make almost like scaling level decisions way too early. We're way too early in the process and we're worried about scale. We're worried about how we make decisions at scale. And quite often we want to give ourselves permission to keep our decisions small. As we go through, if you have questions, just drop them in Q&A, because I will answer questions after I kind of go through this, and we'll jump into some of these if you have any questions about what I'm writing about here. Okay, so another thing that I want to call out is when we lead through uncertainty is when I'm coaching, especially leaders at a higher level of the organization, that we have to give ourselves kind of a different take on accountability. All right. So there are multiple definitions of accountability, and I always hear this really negative framed definition of holding people accountable. Like, I'm holding my teams accountable, I'm holding my direct reports accountable. It's never in a good light usually, but there are kind of different ways to think about accountability. One way to think about it in high uncertainty is you want to give teams this ability, like giving an account, right? So essentially, we talk about like all these different ceremonies, right? And let's say we go for 12 weeks on an idea, all right? So there are all these different ceremonies, and there's like a checkpoint where we want to check in with the team and say, hey, do we pivot this? Are we persevering, or maybe, are we kind of just killing what we're working on, right? So you have teams that are working through that process. They're trying to work through the uncertainty. They're trying to say, here's our recommendation of whether or not we keep going, or we want to pivot in a different direction, or if we just want to like park this thing or shelve it or kill it. And so when you think about giving an account, you, as leaders, you need to create an environment where people can give an account. They're not held accountable to running experiments. They're put in a situation where they can give an account to whether or not we should pivot, persevere, or park this thing. And it's a conversation with leadership. And usually what I see is, if I'm coaching leaders and I'm also kind of helping out the teams, they're aligned most of the time. Very rarely do I see situations where teams say, "Oh, we should keep going," and then leadership goes, "No, we should kill this." Like that happens on occasion, but most of the time, I would say 9 times out of 10, they're pretty much in alignment. It's because they're talking along the way, and then the leaders are giving space for the teams to work through the uncertainty versus the other kind of flavor of this, which is I would say like holding accountable, which doesn't have to always be a negative when it comes to uncertainty and leadership style. But if you have like a known problem space and a known solution space, and you're just executing on something you've always done, then it's like, oh, I'm going to hold you accountable to like getting this thing done on this time, right, with this budget. But that doesn't necessarily work very well in high uncertainty. It's almost like it can work against you as leaders. So when you're trying to coach people through this, you don't necessarily want them in a situation where they're trying to hold the team accountable to running experiments. It's just a very weird dynamic, and it doesn't necessarily help empower the teams. In some way, it almost like disempowers them, if you think about it. um, Hopefully, I don't run out of space here. I have lots more stuff to cover. So let me move this up a little bit for you all. Okay, so let's talk about some more things that like helping coach teams through this and helping coach leaders through this like mindset shift of like what kind of environment are you dealing with and how do you coach through it and how do you lead through it. So the next is language. Okay, so what I'm trying to help leaders understand is like we need to use language like we, us, our. When you're going through this, the language matters. And so when you're going through like high uncertainty situations, it's usually more about us as a whole, right? Whereas if you're going through low uncertainty and it's more about holding people accountable and what you know, then quite often it's like I, me, mine. It's a lot of like I'm the expert in this space and we know what we're doing. And so it's like a known problem, no solution. So I can use my expertise to kind of work through that. And it's not necessarily working against me. Whereas if you're in high uncertainty space and you're trying to coach people through this, that whole like first person language can unintentionally unravel what you're trying to do as you navigate that space, right? So when you kind of go through this and you're talking about, oh, I know what experiment you should run, or I know we should persevere, like you really kind of want to help shift this to more of like a we, us, our, like we're in this together, we're dealing with this uncertainty together. And I'm not necessarily just leading with my expertise on this. I'm, kind of in line with these other things where we're modeling things out. We're trying to keep our decisions small. I'm giving, we're giving an account as a team, as a group, right? And so this is where the cross-functional teams really help as well. But this idea of language, not that you should go and do language analysis on all your leaders in your company, but this idea of, hey, do they speak in first person all the time? Because if they do, they're probably operating in this mindset of, oh, I know this because I'm an expert and this isn't very uncertain. Like I know here. And quite often that works against you when you're trying to portray that you know maybe in a situation where you don't know. And so this idea of uncertainty and how you lead through it with language is also super important. A couple other things that kind of that kind of really resonate with me that I use is also, let me kind of try to stay in here. I have a couple more I want to share with you. One is leading with questions, right? So when I talk about leading with questions, it's quite often in this high uncertainty environment, we don't necessarily want to lead with answers as first person language saying, I know the way, we just do this and we're going to be fine. Quite often it's, oh, what do you think our riskiest assumption is? Or what do you think experiment we should run? Or like, what is your recommendation? So it's a lot of, it doesn't mean you don't have an opinion, but you are trying to lead with questions in a way where you're empowering the teams. Okay. And you're giving them a space to give an account. And then you ask questions about, oh, have you considered this or this? And so I find this is really hard, especially with expert, like individually really really smart people that have kind of ascended the ranks over time because of what they knew, right? They were able to know, they knew something, they're very smart, they were able to do that thing really well. They were rewarded for that, and therefore they believe that that kind of leadership behavior is applicable across the board. But in high uncertainty environments, especially if you're trying to create a new business that you're going to a market that you've never really explored before, that level of like that style of leadership can work against you in that situation, right? So when there's a lot of uncertainty, this idea of I know best, just do this, we're going to be fine. Well, typically what happens is I see leaders give that direction to a team, and the team does what the leader recommends, and then things work out poorly. And so then the leader feels like I'm losing credibility, and some weird behaviors can result as a part of that, you know? So when you think about leading with answers, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. But when you think about how it portrays, like how it applies to uncertainty, like if you're the expert in something and you're doing something repeatable and it's in a known problem space, known solution space, and nothing's really changing, that might be perfectly acceptable. Like, I've done this a million times before. I know exactly what to do, and let's do this thing. And you execute on it, and everyone listens to you, and everything's great. But when you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, that model can be very contradicting because you're trying to say, I know best, let's just do this, and quite often it backfires, and then leaders are going like are getting really frustrated by it, and a lot of kinds of like weird behaviors come out of that. So when I'm kind of coaching people through this, it's not just using different language, but it's also trying to lead with questions versus answers, right? It doesn't mean you never give the team an answer, but so far, like I'll see leaders say, oh, they'll give the teams the benefit of their opinion, right? But the way the opinion comes off is an answer. And so you have to really, really be careful of how you frame things, because really great leaders, even at the top companies I deal with all around the world, like they want to feel very in touch with their teams and their employees, right? And so they'll just kind of give them the benefit of their opinion, right? But the way it's structured and everything, it comes off as, I think you should do X, so go do X. And teams feel that pressure, even if it's not spoken that way. And so a lot of coaching is, hey, when you're checking in with teams, like, are you aware that sometimes when you're giving your opinion on something, that they're taking that as um, marching orders to go do something? And sometimes I talk to leaders and they're just completely unaware of that. They're like, no, no, I didn't mean for them to go do that thing. I thought I was just helping out, right? But you have to just keep in mind of the situation and how you come off. So that's a lot of my coaching too. Is sometimes inside orgs, that feedback doesn't make it to the leader. But if I'm coming outside into an org and kind of observing and coaching along, I kind of have that luxury where I can give that feedback in a way that's not, I mean, if you all see me, you kind of get my style, right? It's not necessarily very confrontational. So it's very much like a, hey, did you realize when you said that, like this team is going to run off and do X, Y, and Z? Just being able to give that feedback to leaders is super important. And then finally, this is probably the biggest one that comes up when I talk about leading through like uncertain situations in companies versus certain situations, is three little words that come up, which is I don't know. um I have this thing I do sometimes when I come with companies. When I come in and they ask me to give a talk or meet with their leadership team, and I'll ask them like, "When's the last time you said I don't know in front of your team?" And sometimes I get a look of panic from the group of execs I'm working with, and sometimes it's, "Oh yeah, I say that all the time." That's not necessarily um, that's not necessarily something that it bothers me, right? So when you think about when you're dealing with like uncertainty, and say you're creating like a new product, you have a new product, service, or business idea, and you're trying to test your way through that, right? Which is generally where I'm operating. I often want to hear leaders say, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't mean you say, I don't know all the time. And I think that's sometimes I get that response from leaders, that I say, I don't know. Um, if I say I don't know, they think I don't know anything. And I was like, no, no, that's not necessarily what I'm going for. It's just, are you opening up to the fact that, like, hey, we're dealing with a situation that maybe we don't understand the problem very well. And we certainly don't understand the solution, because if we don't even understand the problem, then we can't necessarily jump to a solution. So this idea of I don't know, like I don't know, essentially, like I don't know what the right experiment is here to run, and that's why we have a coach, or et cetera. And so I often frame this as saying, kind of like, I don't know versus I know. So if you think about uncertainty with the sense of and the framing here is very much uncertainty in trying to create a new product, service, or business idea. Okay. So the context here is we think about highly uncertain situations where we're trying to reimagine our product in a different way. We're trying to take our product into a new market. We're trying to create something completely new, which is adjacent to what we've always done. There's lots of uncertainty with that. Okay. Whereas a lot of the low uncertainty work I see are things like, oh, we have this existing product. It's been around for 30 years. And, even though we're going to test our way through adding, let's say, a new feature to it or something, it's not necessarily groundbreaking work here. It's people have been asking for this. People have already been like willing to give us money just to do this one certain thing. And it's something very repeatable that we're really comfortable doing. And usually if you think of a big company, they've kind of moved from a lot of high uncertainty work to low uncertainty work over time, where they have something that's repeatable and they can predict ROI on it and all that. But with high uncertainty work, when you think about, we're trying to create a completely new product or business or service idea, we're going into a different market, something that's tangential. There's a lot of uncertainty around the problem we're trying to solve, whether our solution would even work. Even if we do find out the problem, will people pay enough for it? Can we execute on it? Are there regulatory things we're going to run into? And so when you think about this idea of like, I don't know, or I know, um, there's this idea of, okay, in a situation where it's kind of a certain and it's ordered work and we know and we can just plan our way and execute and we're fine. That is a style that I am not necessarily it's not necessarily my world, but I'm not painting it in a negative light. Like that style works for certain situations. But when I'm trying to coach people through, okay, we don't know this market. We don't know if the customers have the problem that we think they have. We don't know if we can solve it, right? This idea of uncertainty and how we navigate that, using a lot of your low uncertainty kind of tool set of I'm going to plan my way through that. I'm going to make decisions about how we scale. I'm going to hold people accountable to running experiments. I'm going to talk about what I know, and I'm going to tell tell the teams what to do. That can work actively against you. All right. So this kind of framework, what I'm trying to do over time when I'm with my coaching is I'm trying to get to a situation where um, I help teams understand that, hey, if we start off with high uncertainty, yes, we model, but eventually it's okay if we have a model that can like inform. Um, my drawing kind of went away there. 1 second. Not sure what happened there. This idea of like how we inform the plan, right? So that that piece here where we're kind of go from modeling to planning really kind of sets the stage of like, have you ever tried to model things out before? Sometimes people are asking for like a 5-year business plan on an idea they just came up with a week ago. Well, there's no like you're projecting 5 years on something with extreme uncertainty, and you're not going to be able to accurately do that. So you start to have to ask, why am I being asked to do that? Or why am I asking teams to create a plan? Is it so I feel more comfortable with this? Right. So a lot of my coaching is helping leaders understand, okay, what is my tool set and what am I working with right now? And am I even aware that there are these other things I can do to empower teams? Because I don't think necessarily anything's like nefarious here or people are trying to undermine each other. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And so what I constantly see with leaders and organizations is I want to build like this culture of experimentation. And then people constantly are like, they're not doing what I want, like I expect them to do to make this work. And quite often they're not doing it because you're making it about yourself. You're kind of holding them accountable versus like having them space to give an account. You're using a lot of first person language with this. And so quite often my coaching is like, how do we basically kind of give leaders this other skill set they can use and they can kind of try out, and these muscles they can build where they help people model. We keep our decisions small. We help them give an account. We use third person language. We kind of lead with questions more, and we can say I don't know, and nothing like the world doesn't end when we say I don't know in front of our team. So I know this is a lot because well, there's a lot to unpack here, but I want to open it up to questions. So Clarissa, do we have anything in Q&A? I know we have some in chat here as well. Let me look here. Oh, Alejandro is like, it's about being humble as a leader. Yeah, there's a little bit of humility here, um, with regards to owning up to the fact that maybe you don't know the best path forward. That is very difficult for some folks to comprehend. Now, here's the thing. I work with a lot of U.S. based companies. Okay, and so the U.S. has its own culture. I fully understand that and recognize that. But what has happened over the years, and I kind of get on a rant a little bit in the book about this, is that in our schooling, we have been taught to be right. Okay. So, quite often at a very young age, the way kids are taught is like we got to find a single right answer, and we have to score very high on our tests. And the tests are about finding the single right answer. And we're rewarded for that. And so, when you move on into like higher education, quite often it's a lot of similar stuff, right? We're trying to find the single right answer to, let's say, a problem. It assumes that we know the problem, and it assumes there's a single right answer to that problem. Okay. So when we get into business, let's say we start our own company out of college. I joined a startup out of college, right? So that was a crazy ride for about 8 years. Some people jump into corporate America, right? They jump into a big business, right? And quite often, and maybe that's why I was drawn to startups, but in larger corporations, you're kind of rewarded for being right again. You know, like, oh, you got that right, so here's your bonus or here's a promotion, and so people ascend inside organizations because they've been more right than wrong. And so for me to come in and say, okay, so ever since you were a child, you've been rewarded for being right. And now it's just okay to be wrong. I think it's almost unfair. It's almost like it kind of shakes their whole mental model, right? It's like, oh my gosh, my whole like career trajectory in my life has been on finding the right answers, you know? And so I try to frame it in a little different way. Say, okay, but here we don't know. Like we don't know who the customer is. We don't know what their problems are. We don't know what the solution is to their problems. So instead of like jumping with the solution and creating a plan and acting like there's a sense of security with that, let's just own up to the fact that we don't know. We have some ideas, we have some assumptions. Let's go test those. And let's keep our tests really small until we learn more, and then we can invest more. Okay. So I just want to preface this with there's a reason why this is hard. And part of the reason why it's hard is that the way people have been educated and the way they've been promoted in business is all about them having the answers. And so at some point, you have to realize that as a leader, it's about creating more leaders around you. And it's about having tools to deal with uncertainty. And so when I'm working on all these new business ideas, we need a tool set to work with that. We need a language to work with that. We need an accountability model to work with that. We can't just take everything we've been rewarded for and that has worked and just like apply it to high uncertainty work. So um there's a question about keeping decisions small. How small is small? Yeah, so it's something small. Like as a leader, it's we're exploring this new business idea. Let's not necessarily staff it with 20 engineers, which I've seen. Some of the most prominent companies I work with in Silicon Valley will throw like 20 software developers at an early stage idea with almost no design help, no product help, very little product help. So, what do you think a group of 20 software developers are going to do? They're going to build. Like that's what that's what they do, right? It's no fault of their own. And so, what happens is you jump to the solution space really, really, really early and at scale. Like just think about the cost of throwing 20 full-time employees at an idea, right? So when I say keep decisions small, like maybe that's a team of 3 or a team of 2 that's exploring that idea. You know, maybe we have a designer that knows enough software development to like put together an MVP with some help, and we have a product person that can help do discovery work, right? It's about keeping that small, and then as you understand more, giving yourself permission to grow the team. And I do try to illustrate that in the book as we go through the process. You know, you kind of give yourself permission to grow the team size, but that's a really trivial one. Like you're not keeping your decisions small when you throw that amount of resources at something with that much uncertainty, right? And such a large group together like that is really, really difficult. The other ways you can think about keeping decisions small are with your experiments, right? So think about your tests. You could do customer interviews, you could do search trend analysis, you could do surveys, you could do some paper prototyping, you could do some preference and prioritization stuff. Like there are a lot of really quick experiments you can run that don't cost a lot, that'll give you a little bit evidence to know directionally, are we on the right track? Versus jumping to say, hey, let's build our app. well, let's build this thing and launch it, and that'll be our MVP. And the dirty secret there is like the MVP is the final product. It's like we called it an MVP, we threw it in production, and we just marketed it, and that became the product, right? So I feel as if there's like layers of keeping your decision small. One is team size. Keep your team size small with high uncertainty. The other thing is keep your funding small. Like don't overfund a team because that doesn't necessarily incentivize them to test. They're gonna like go through the money, right? And the other thing is keep your experiments small. Keep them small, cheap, fast. There's a bunch of those in the discovery section of the book to help you, find some evidence that if you're on the right track or not. We have some question about uncertainty versus certainty. Oh yeah, I don't know. I don't really like quantify certainty, uncertainty. I feel it's I am very much working in the uncertain space because it's very much a new product, business, or service idea that I'm always get pulled in to help teams work through or help a company build a repeatable process for testing them really quickly. But I do think with your question, and this one came from Dan, is there is a way to convince yourself that you know when you don't. And I think that's another thing with leadership styles we have to be aware of, that if I can convince you I know the problem and the solution, then we just make progress. Well, we build stuff. I don't know. I don't know if we're de-risking, but there is some of that happens where people are very charismatic and they're very persuasive, and so they can persuade you that they know something that maybe they don't know. And so some of my coaching is just opening up to the fact of coming back to I know versus I don't know. Like, are we safe? Is it a safe environment to say I don't know? Like, that's really, really important. So sometimes we try to take all those tools on the right here and apply them on the left because we've convinced ourselves that we're in a certain space or a space with low uncertainty. And there's all kind of ways to help people understand that it's not going to work out well. One of the things I like doing with leaders, sometimes I run leadership workshops where I show these kind of different thinking tools to them. And then I have them think back to a situation in their company where they tried to use something they thought would work really well and it was a disaster. And usually it's a disaster because they were using the wrong leadership style in the wrong space, right? So they were taking something that was like low uncertainty leadership style and they were applying it to something highly uncertain. And that's why it went poorly. And so that's one way I try to get them to the aha moment, whereas, oh, well, we should be using this instead. And so it's not perfect, but it does work quite a bit when I'm working with groups of leaders. Jeff has one about this being right mindset leads to incorrect assumptions. Yeah, like this idea of we're going to be like, I'm right, and there's some maybe things on your assumptions map. So I know y'all have seen me like draw these a million times, but if you think about your 2x2, right, and you're going through, hey, what's risky and what's not, quite often, right, we get these little stickies, and we have orange for desirability, right, and then we have our blue for feasibility, and we have our green for viability. So what can happen sometimes is that we think we know, and so we'll say, and I have courses and stuff I can share with you all about how to facilitate this, but essentially we'll have people take this orange sticky about the customer and say it's way over here, and they'll say, yep, I validated that, I know. And it's like, okay, well, how do you know? Like, and when I dig into it, it's I ran a survey or I talked to a customer, and then I have to have this conversation about evidence about, hey, that's pretty light evidence that should be closer over to this side. But it's quite often, what'll happen here is this low uncertainty mindset, right? We'll say, oh, that we know that. We know the customers want it, and we know they'll pay for it. So really all our uncertainty is like building it, and we just need to build it. And so this is like an anti-pattern to look out for when I'm coaching teams, where I don't want to see like all this in assumptions map, right? Early on, early stage idea where we're not sure what we're getting into. I don't want to see an assumptions map that looks like this, where it's all feasibility risk and all this stuff that we start questioning and realize, oh, we didn't really test this. We just thought we knew and we moved it all over. That's why I've changed the labels on the assumptions map over the years like 3 times, is because I would have people say, I just know, and they would put it over here, right? So there are ways to kind of look out for this. But it's this I know mindset of, oh yeah, we know the customers want this and pay for it. We just have to go build. And you have to be very careful of that, because that's not like, that's easy to get into the scaling conversation. Again, let's throw more people at it so we can build faster. And we kind of skip the steps of, oh, but do they really have that problem? And oh, will they really pay for that? Because they said they would, but would they? There's a lot of stuff that this is like a problematic view of how to approach it. So there are some ways this manifests. And one I find is when we're helping teams facilitate 2x2s, that it ends up being a situation where they want to kind of skip all the discovery and just go to build. So any other questions? How do we determine whether you're in a high or low certainty environment? Yeah, maybe it's easier for me because I'm always like brought into the high uncertainty side of things. But there's some great frameworks out there that I love as well, that I do weave into my coaching, especially my executive and board level coaching. There's a great framework called Cynefin. It's by Dave Snowden, and so it's if you look that up online, there's some really great YouTube videos, and he doesn't frame it exactly like this. He has like it's almost like a 2x2, but it's not necessarily a 2x2 because there's like a space in the middle for disorder and everything. But he kind of also frames as like ordered and unordered work, and how you probe, and how do you know what space you're in. There's like a treasure trove of YouTube videos on that. So if you're looking for like an additional resource, let me undo that. If you're looking for like additional resources here, I would say Cynefin is a great place to look for just YouTube videos. Now it's pronounced Cynefin. I think it's his language. I think it's 2 F's for the F sound. So I think I'm pronouncing that right, Cynefin. There's also some great stuff around like leadership agility that I like. So there's some books around that as well that might help you out. They kind of go through a lot of this. They don't frame it exactly like this, but there are books around expert directive kind of leadership styles and everything like that. So there are some leadership books that I like, and kind of models that help me. But yeah, Kevin is really it's kind of groundbreaking stuff. I think the trick with it is making it actionable for people. Sometimes you share that with people and they just go, huh? And they give you like this tilted look. and so you do have to make it actionable in a way. So just be mindful that like, once you get into that world, try to keep back to like, how does this help my coaching? Like, how do I help people understand what space they're in? So we're almost at time. Any other questions from the group on anything I covered here about kind of this coaching model, especially with leading? And again, this leading can happen at the team level, or at the portfolio level, or at the org level. Usually at the org level, I'm focused more on the environment and the systems, whereas at team level, I'm much more focused on, almost like team tactical level stuff. But leadership does matter there too. It's not like it's just at the top of the company. All right. I think that's all. So again, I'm just trying to give you like some insights to how I approach coaching. This is very much like how I go about coaching is getting in front of people and trying to find out where they are and kind of meet them where they are, and then try to help them move forward to sort of this environment that they want to see happen. And it's very much a long haul. Like some of my coaching clients, I've been working with 2 or 3 years right now. So it's not something that happens overnight. But if you think about, this idea of like, how do I create an environment where, I'm using this, right? I'm helping people model things out instead of plan. I'm helping keep our decisions small. I'm helping them give an account versus holding them accountable. I'm helping with this language of I'm not always using first person language when I'm talking to people. I'm asking questions like, what do you think your riskiest assumption is? And I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. And you're not going to figure this all out at once. But I think if you're looking for a tool set, or looking for, hey, how do I get buy-in, or how do I start working with people to really drive this home and make it stick, these are some of the things that are my go-tos. All right. All right, so I put some links in the chat. You can always find me on LinkedIn, posting memes and all kinds of stuff like that. There are some ways I can help you with the book and with my courses and such. But yeah, just wanted to hang out and show you some behind the scenes of how I approach coaching. So I'm hoping you're able to take one or two things away today with your leaders. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. We're going to do more of these next year if we find this valuable. So if you found it valuable, let us know. Feel free, and I will throw this recording up on YouTube so you can find it on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of your week.